listen to four dimensions of social science, humanities, and management, orienting us towards development. So I think we should take a few minutes. I think we started 20 minutes or 25 minutes late, right? We need to end up by about, if we to keep on time, maybe 15 minutes from now. Okay, so we have about, say, 5-6 questions thrown at our speakers, and then let's have a dialogue. Floor is yours.
Related to that particular presentation, plus the speaker from the industry. Talk about, of course, two aspects of the professionalism. Professor Gunaratna, of course, emphasized on the macro level approach to have professionalism here in Sri Lanka, and the speaker from the industry, of course, focus on micro level. And as I see, I think both are going to be very important. And there are sometimes maybe I'm sorry, I could not exactly pronounce your name. Where? Sean. Okay. Now, in your presentation, you of course talk about basics, I think. And I think that is very important. And there, of course, you said that waiting is going to cost. So nobody would like to wait. Right? Professor Gunaratna mentioned that here in Sri Lanka, of course, we do not like to wait. And of course, maybe I think there is no clash between these two presentations. If you could elaborate on the micro aspects and macro aspects and the complementary linkage with these approaches, going to be helpful for us.
The developed world, if you really analyze how much they emphasize on waiting, if you look at, I'll take a simple example of an airport. The international airports consider a passenger to be, that is a passenger who is going out of the airport, disembarking from a plane, to be average of 22 minutes. Because they feel that here is a human being who has done a long distance flight. He doesn't have time to waste at terminals. It's about rapid transport development. Compare Singapore and our country. There was a thought that we are going to make this an aviation hub. Right? And we sat in that airport. I have had many experiences where we sat in that airport for 45 minutes, your bags don't come. Now, if this continues in this country, you can just imagine the amount of waiting that is happening for one passenger. It's not only him. If it's a tour, the whole bus is held up. If it's a tour guide, he is held up. The hotel is waiting. Then what happens? The driver has to go to the hotel, he has to get the passenger fast into the hotel. He drives fast. Knowing our country, he doesn't adhere the rules, because you don't abide by the rules when you drive fast. You risk the passenger, you risk the driver's life, and you risk a lot of monetary damage to anyone per se. This compared to what we see in the Sri Lankan mindset. Waiting is today, to keep somebody waiting is a kick for the individual. You look, how many appointments do you make with doctors? You make an appointment, you go on e-channel and you get an appointment at 4:30. The doctor walks in at 5:30. There is no professionalism in that. What is professionalism is, the way we see it, is discipline, to be on time, to respect each other. You look at our government authorities. The function starts at 7 o'clock. Everybody is seated and waiting. He waltzes in at 8 o'clock, or she. Can you imagine the waiting that is taking place? We are willing to not to challenge this process. As a country, we are not challenging this process. We have had instances where we have walked out of appointments because the person didn't come on time. We had a Japanese buyer that we gave him an appointment at 8 o'clock, we only saw him at 8:30. By the time he went to 8:30, he had gone, we lost the business. So this is something that you can address it through social science, you can address it to professionalism. The waiting aspect is a major disaster and a cost factor for everybody. It's a chain of events. If you go to see the OIC of a police station, for example, how many people are waiting to see him? He doesn't turn up. Many excuses. So this is what I was trying to link, was that waiting is one of the biggest waste in this country. From the time you get up to you go to sleep, you're waiting for something to happen, or you're waiting for somebody to come and meet you. It's costing you and the country. Your productivity is dropped. Did I answer it link it in a way?
Any other questions? Can I, Mr. Van Dort, can I add on to that a bit? Now, I understood that waste minimization would enhance efficiency and cut down production cost per unit, and then you can meet the competitive environment in the international market. But I don't understand, when it was $8 10 years ago, and today it is $8. Now you managed to somehow cut your waste and waiting and all these things, and you met it at 8. Now what are you going to do if it is going to keep at 8 again for the next decade? Aren't we basically trying to cut on to our and build on pressure on our economy simply because of some other irrational factors in the international market? True enough, we might not be able to do anything because it's beyond our control. What is our rescue? Now you can go and cut and make efficient and all these things, but there is a limit to it. Beyond which, what are you going to do?
That's a good question. We asked this from our buyers as well. Well, we migrated since you brought it from the apparel sector, what we have done is we have gone out of the simple manufacturing processes. The simple products are today manufactured in Bangladesh. A boxer short that we manufactured for $2 is now manufactured in Bangladesh for 75 cents. The fabric alone will cost you $1. Yeah, so the niche products are now looked into this country because we have 30 years of experience. We have looked at taking all the waste out of our process, and we have now the buyers are comfortable to give us the niche product because they know we'll deliver quality and we'll deliver speedily. So that's the answer that I could give you.
Malaysia being a country which had a lot of rubber, at one stage they uprooted all rubber and went out of the rubber industry. Malaysia was the leading rubber manufacturer in the world when I was at Rubber Research Institute in 1982. The largest rubber exporter in the world. But there was a stage that they simply decided this is not the industry for us because the international market was demanding low prices where they could not meet up with. And they decided, rather than compressing our costs here, maybe you can go into a level where you cut down your waste and efficiency build up and all these things. But beyond a certain level, if you want to retain in your industry, you need to curtail the social well-being of your people. So you can't pay them. And Malaysia decided, no, nothing doing, rubber is not for us. They just simply uprooted and went into a different, we call it industrial migration. So they went into a different industry, and rubber is no longer their product. Any other questions, gentlemen, ladies? Professor Amunugam, I have a question for you. You mentioned about mother tongue. How important mother tongue is for development, particularly in the Sri Lankan context?
Yes. Well, the problem is I can only give an opinion because the debates are still on this language matter. To the fact that even still now the debate is on whether you think and speak or speak and think. Right? Well, as you know, even the language variations are numerous. Now, if you take somebody, you can say a person is on one extreme, he is a monolingual person. Person who speaks only his mother tongue. On the other side, on the other extreme, you can have a person who speaks several languages, right? So, in between, you have, now when you say mother tongue, the definition of mother tongue itself is questionable. Now, if you take the generations, those who have migrated, right? I will come to your question, but I want to give you the background of that. Now, the migrants, we say the first generation of migrants, you know, they take the example of a Sri Lankan family going to France. They migrated for some reason or other. Well, they maintain their own language, Sinhala or Tamil, as their mother tongue. Their first generation, that is their children, perhaps who were born there, who have done their schooling in France, you know, for them, they are really bilingual, and depending on the context, with their families, they speak their own language. When they go to school or in the society, they speak the other language. So it is a real bilingualism, where they are competent in both. But when it comes to the third generation, their own children, now it has been revealed that they are the people who are trying to find their identity to their cultural appartenance, right? Which means mainly through their language. And you find many people coming back to their own country. I'm not talking about Sri Lankans. Mainly in Europe and the North African countries, it is very prevalent because of the proximity, right? So that is to give you an example of the multitude facets of what you call this monolingualism, bilingualism, and the multilingualism. So how does that come to connection with the industry, with the development, is depending on how you define also the development. What do you mean by development? Now, is it innovatory development, or is it something which you have started and you continue the development? Now, I'm of the opinion that whatever you say, if we are used to a language, our own language from the birth, and then we have developed our language, but I think now industry or development, if you say it is the industry, or rather now we call it the innovation. It's a knowledge economy now. So innovation is very important. For that, I think the mother tongue, take for example, now you can be very fluent in any language. Now, when you go to a shop, when the merchant give you balance, you count money. In which language do you count? Automatically. You count in Sinhala, you don't count in English, even you are in a English speaking environment. So that is where the mother tongue becomes very important. I don't say only to speak, because only thinking in that mother tongue is very important for the development. Because that is what I call a pillar of what you call the sustainable development.
In fact, my question was basically that, the last word that you used, because in sustainable development context, we value what is called diversity. Biodiversity, diversity of different species, diversity of identities. We need to preserve the diversity. Now, when there is a possibility of language extinction, isn't it important that mother tongue be preserved for development? That was basically my question. Okay. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Can I have a
Yeah.
my domain in the field of this waste
Yes.
and the management? I don't know if there are any other persons who are of my age, but anyway, we have the experience. I have the life experience of, in Kandy, when I was a schoolboy, when I wanted to give a telephone call to a friend in Colombo, so I had to take the bus and come to Kandy town, and there is, in the Trincomalee Street, there is a post office. I go there and
Book a call.
and I will be very happy if I get that call within 5 hours, within 5 hours. So I sit on the bench at the post office, wait for 5 hours, and I will get the call, and then I said I'm very happy. But now, of course, I take my mobile out of my pocket, and I immediately dial my son who is in the other end of the globe, So, did I waste my time at that time? Was it was it done purposely? I didn't, because there was a second-hand bookshop. I used to buy this sometimes schoolgirl, comics, or Tarzan comics, and gradually other books. And I read entirely the book during that time. It is over, but still the call didn't come. So I go back to the seller, second-hand bookseller. I return the book, give about 10 cents more, and then buy another book and come and read, and so forth. But whatever it is, the point is the mindset. I never felt that I was wasting time. But in spite of the fact that I was sitting for 5 hours, I never said in my life, I don't have time. I don't have time to do anything. Now everything can be done very quickly, but how many times among you have said, I don't have time to do this, do that? So don't you think it's also the mindset which is very important?
Yes. I think that's a very important insight. I can remember rearranging my father's cupboard when he died 20 years ago. I came from France after my PhD, and my father was dead, and I was arranging his shelf, the books and the files and all these things what he had done. I could not imagine the work that he had done. President of this association, secretary of that association, and the being a teacher and being a social worker, the political activist and everything. And he did not have a mobile phone, he did not have a phone at home, he did not have a vehicle, he just had a push bike. And my father had all the time to sit with us at about 6 o'clock in the evening, myself, my sister and my younger brother, and relate all stories and history tales and everything, and tell us everything. And he never, as you said very correctly, sir, he never had shortage of time. He had all the time with us. Now today, we have cars, we have mobile phones, we have emails, faxes and everything, and we have no 5 minutes to sit with our children and say what we had done during the day. I think that's, as you said, it's the mindset. I think we are chasing after something which we never reach there, and we would want to run faster, and we run faster and we never catch it. And again you say it's no time, you run faster with all technology, and then you might never catch it. You want to add something? Yes.
Just to share experience I had in Japan, when we went on this lean tour, I asked this professor, now you are talking about you are wasting your time. You take 2 hours every day to commute to your office by train. And I was on that train. And I said, isn't that waste? He said, Sean, to you it's waste. To me, I was reading a book, you were just looking out of the window. And what did you learn? Nothing. it opened my eyes. So
it all depends on what you do. It's basically a question of opportunity cost, right? So if you really use your time worthwhile, then it doesn't matter. You know, that's that. I mean, as long as you are happy and you do something productive, that's all what matters. Professor Silva, I have a question from you. You said that you need to have a national social research council in this country. Isn't NCAS doing this basically?
No, NCAS is simply supporting
Research.
research by university staff
Okay.
for their postgraduate education.
Isn't that kind of,
It's not enough actually. Of course, NCAS is doing a very good thing in terms of helping young people to get trained and providing research funds. But what I mean is more than that. You know, it's like it should be high caliber research where teams will work on high priority national issues.
So do you mean like NCAS, the scope of NCAS should be enlarged, or you need a different organization altogether?
Completely outside, maybe part of National Science Foundation or
Oh, I
something like that, where actually we use our limited resources in a way which actually promote national development. Research money will be spent on high priority research questions. So that's what I mean. Most countries have social science research council that Bangladesh has, India has, and you know that has actually enabled local researchers to you know, like develop good research proposals and also do team research. Now NCAS is primarily for funding for one individual for him to be able to complete his research project, but not for joint research where senior researchers will work with juniors and so on and so
So
on.
it's basically a social science research funding mechanism you are looking into. Yes, please. The mic.
I would appreciate if Professor Teodoro Silva could explain a bit more about the negative aspect of professionalism. He mentioned, I would say it's, or sometimes maybe can say it's over professionalism. So he slightly mentioned that in his slides. Now I felt that when you see professionalism as a discourse, which is constructed and we are in a way getting into it. So it's in a way over professionalize us, and what would happen to other alternative ways of doing things. For example, if we are to professionalize a particular field, what would happen to other alternative or perhaps indigenous fields? Are we to professionalize those indigenous fields as well? So let's say, for example, if you take counseling, for example, there can be other ways of doing indigenous ways of doing the same thing. But when we over-professionalize, or when we, as we walk into the discourse of professionalism, we set standards, right? So then in a way that averts the space for other indigenous practices. That's how I felt. So how do you address that particular question?
That's a good question. Actually, that maybe what you said has a direct relevance to medicine, for instance. Now we have Western medicine and we have Ayurveda, indigenous medicine, Unani, the whole range. I don't think it's a good idea to professionalize all those fields, because one good feature of traditional practitioners is that they are easily accessible to local people, and that people can go and talk to them. We know that if you go to, I think it was mentioned, when we go to a Western private practitioner, he doesn't have time for us. Maybe just gives 2 or 3 minutes, but a traditional practitioner will actually talk with you and understand your problem. So so I don't think it's a good idea to actually give them a license and say, you have to qualify in this field before you actually get your license, because that will actually take away whatever merit that person has as a practitioner accessible to local people. So you also asked about the other problems with professionalism. This closure is one. Closure meaning like a small number of people try to control the whole industry without opening up opportunities for other people, so that actually they can benefit more, but actually society will lose in the end, because we need more and more people who have proper qualifications and orientation to enter that profession. So that is another aspect. So I'm not saying professionalism is always bad. What I'm saying is that there are certain features of professionalism which is not good for country's development.
Thank you very much. I think the time is up. We should probably close though it's very interesting, we might probably continue the discourse, but every good thing has to come to an end. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's high time that we closed up the session. Let me sum up by saying that our survival will depend on professionalism appropriate for our society. Professionalism, the way that we have to get it for our country. We don't need to probably blindly follow the professionalism that we call in the international arena. But what we want for our society, the way we want, we should get it. The key is productivity and the national development, while keeping our values, our identity and our inheritance. So if we manage to do that, keeping our values and our inheritance with us, persisting, sustaining, while developing the productivity and efficiency so that we can be in par with the developed world, I think that's the key of the success. So to that level, we need professionalism. Professionalism is based on trust. It's one of the ways of trusting the services provided, because you would want to go to a doctor when he is a member of a professional body. That's where the whole crux of the matter starts. Now, 50, 60 years ago, when a patient wants to go and get treated for his or her eye, you would go to a traditional doctor who would put something onto your eye. You would never have any distrust or mistrust against that Veda Mahatya. But today, it's basically like that you don't want to risk that way, and then you go to this professionalized body for that treatment. On the one hand, that gives you the trust and the development orientation and the safety. On the other hand, you might, in the same spirit, kill our inherited knowledge-based and knowledge band, because there is no demand for that anymore. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a key that we might probably have to balance between the professionalism and preserving our heritage and inheritance as a society. Let me conclude by simply saying a yarn about professionalism. At one time, I was asked the difference between a doctor and an engineer. Two professions, a doctor and an engineer. and an economist versus an accountant. These are all professions. Now, accountant and an economist. They say accountant is a person who knows the cost of everything and value of nothing. And an accountant who knows the value of everything and cost of nothing. Similarly, a person said, what is the definition of an engineer? How do you distinguish between